Hi, this is Kirsten Jenkins, and my nervous system video discussion will be about the main regions of the brain, subregions, and their functions. The main regions of the brain are the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brain stem. The cerebrum constitutes about 83% of the brain's volume and consists of a pair of half globes called the cerebral hemispheres. The cerebral hemispheres are marked by thick folds called gyri and are separated by shallow grooves called sulci. The longitudinal cerebral fissure is a deep median groove in the cerebrum that separates the right and left hemispheres. The cerebrum consists of the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe, and the insula. The frontal lobe lies immediately behind the frontal bone and is superior to the eyes. This part of the brain is responsible for the higher level functions of our consciousness, such as abstract thought, explicit memory, mood, motivation, foresight, planning, decision-making, emotional control, social judgment, and voluntary motor control and speech production. The parietal lobe forms the uppermost part of the brain and underlies the parietal bone. This part of the brain is responsible for taste, somatic sensation, visual processing, spatial perception and awareness, and language processing. The occipital lobe is at the rear of the head underlying the occipital bone. It is primarily responsible for visual processing. It's where we first become aware of visual stimuli and process them to identify what we see. The temporal lobe is a lateral horizontal lobe deep to the temporal bone, separated from the frontal and parietal lobes by a deep lateral sulcus. It is responsible for hearing, smell, emotion, learning, language, comprehension, and memory. It is also responsible for memory consolidation, which is the formation of new long-term memory and storage of verbal, visual, and auditory memories. The insula is a small mass of cortex deep to the lateral sulcus. It plays roles in taste, pain, visceral sensation, consciousness, emotional responses and empathy, and cardiovascular homeostasis. Within these lobes, there are different parts of the brain that are also housed inside of the cerebrum. This includes the thalamus, which is at the superior end of the brainstem beneath the cerebral hemisphere. It plays a part in motor control by relaying signals from the cerebellum to the cerebrum and is involved in memory and emotional functions of the limbic system. The hypothalamus forms the floor and part of the walls of the third ventricle. It is a major control center of the endocrine and autonomic nervous systems. It plays an essential role in the homeostatic regulation of nearly all organs of the body. It has a wide variety of functions such as hormone secretion, autonomic effects, thermoregulation, food and water intake, sleep and circadian rhythms, memory, emotional behavior, and sexual response. The pituitary gland sits at the base of the brain and protrudes off of the bottom of the hypothalamus. It regulates hormone production by producing and releasing hormones that carry out bodily functions such as growth, metabolism, reproduction, and response to stress or trauma. The corpus callosum is a large white matter nerve tract that connects the left and right cerebral hemispheres. It is located deep to the longitudinal fissure. The corpus callosum transfers motor, sensory, and cognitive information between the brain hemispheres and is involved in movement control, cognitive functions, and vision. The cerebellum is located at the back of the brain, behind the brain stem, below the temporal and occipital lobes. The cerebellum is also divided into two hemispheres. It's responsible for coordinating and refining motor movements, ensuring balance and posture, facilitating procedural learning, assisting with vision and eye movement, maintaining balance, posture, and tone of the body, and guiding and coordinating body movement and stance. The brain stem is situated at the base of the brain. It's located between the diencephalon and the spinal cord and sits anterior to the cerebellum and is enclosed within the skull, extending from the base of the brain down to the cervical spinal cord. The functions of the brain stem are to regulate vital bodily functions like breathing and heart rate. They help with balance, coordination, and reflexes, and are responsible for conduction, integration, and is home to cranial nerves which manage sensory and motor functions in the head and neck. The brain stem contains the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. The midbrain is located at the top of the brain stem and controls motor movement, particularly movements of the eye, auditory and visual processing, sleep and wakefulness, alertness, and temperature regulation. The pons is located in between the midbrain and medulla oblongata. It helps relay information between the brain and spinal cord, transmits signals between the forebrain and cerebellum, serves as a bridge linking different regions of the nervous system, and acts as a communication and coordination center between the two hemispheres of the brain. The medulla oblongata sits at the lower part of the brain stem and helps control vital processes like your heartbeat, breathing, and blood pressure. The brain works in tandem with the spinal cord, forming the central nervous system, which is essential for both voluntary and involuntary functions. The brain is the most complex part of the human body. Not only does it control all functions of the body, it interprets information from the outside world and defines who we are as individuals and how we experience the world.